Hi, it's Kai, and today we are going to be doing a full face of e.l.f. cosmetics, or a mostly full face of e.l.f. cosmetics. There's a few categories where I didn't quite have something from e.l.f. and had to do a little bit of substitution, but for the most part, this entire look that I have on my face is using e.l.f. cosmetics products, and well, I like it. It came out okay. It took us on a little bit of a journey to get here, and I particularly wanted to do this video so that I could talk a little bit more about the reasons that I probably won't be purchasing a lot more from e.l.f. Cosmetics myself, but also to add some nuance to some of the conversations around boycotting, especially of beauty brands and things of that nature. Just again, to add nuance to the conversation, because I feel as though there can be a little bit of I'm cutting off this brand and anyone associated with it, or like cutting off this brand and I'm going to use another brand or substitute another brand, but then a lot of people not realizing that the brand ownership or brand owners, or just people involved with that brand, have been shady or have been unethical in the past as well. So again, I wanted to do this video full face of e.l.f. because e.l.f. is a trending topic right now, and I wanted to put my 2 cents in there, but also just show even some alternatives to some of the products that I used in here if I didn't want to repurchase those e.l.f. products. So anyway, let's just stop the chatter and get into it, because this is going to be a longer one. Okie dokie. I usually do not start with my primer because I feel like it's a boring step, but I do use the e.l.f. primer, so that's why I'm going to be using it today. However, part of the reason I wanted to make this video in particular is to talk about how nuanced boycotting can get, because while I do understand the rush in the run to boycott certain brands, especially when they do things that don't align, I am a person who's just sitting here being like, you know what, I have enough makeup to never purchase e.l.f. cosmetics again. There are other brands that I know and love that I can purchase from instead of e.l.f. cosmetics. However, I know that's not everyone's situation, and even in a shorter form video, I did explain this, that sometimes the alternatives that I give aren't necessarily going to be exact alternatives as far as pricing, because that's one corner of the market that e.l.f. for a very long time had. There we go. I was like, why does it look so dark? So my personal favorite eyeshadow primer that is similarly priced, or I think maybe a few more dollars than the Shadow Lock eyelid primer, which I think they actually discontinued and they now have their more expensive one that they have in like black packaging as their only eye primer. I haven't seen this in store, and also when I've gone to get links for this in the past, I've been finding it at fewer and fewer places that I used to have links, and even my previous links for it says that it's low in stock, so I think they may be transitioning this one out of their line. But as I was saying, the alternative that I would give and that I had been using for a really long time, and my personal favorite eyeshadow primer, would be the Milani primer. However, if we are going to crucify e.l.f. for platforming Matt Rife, and the reason that people dislike the fact that Matt Rife was platformed is because I believe in his Netflix special, and I did not know who he was prior to this, and I want to talk a little bit more about like the reasonings behind, because there's been a lot of speculation as to why e.l.f. would put themselves in this position, especially with the type of marketing and branding that they've had in the past. I did not know who Matt Rife was prior to this, and it was through e.l.f. platforming him that I found out about his Netflix special and some of the derogatory jokes that he's made toward women. I know that being a comedian is low-key being an edgelord in a lot of ways, but I feel like if you're actually funny, you don't have to, especially if you are in a certain place of privilege, you don't have to make jokes that punch down. And apparently he made jokes basically implying that if women were in the kitchen, she wouldn't have a black eye or something like that. Again, a tasteless joke. However, as I was saying, if we're going to crucify e.l.f. for that, then Milani, which people knew, and I knew this about this, I knew the situation, and it was one of those things that at the time I was just a little bit more like, I don't know all the details about everything. The situation seems convoluted, and I'm just not understanding why this is becoming a big media storm. But allegedly, Milani has also kind of poked fun at domestic violence victims indirectly, in that when the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard case was a thing, and I'll go ahead and move on to brows. I have the e.l.f, you know, what is this, their brow laminating gel. I have been doing my brows mostly after my foundation, and I might go back and touch them up again after foundation, but I'm just doing it because I feel like this video is going to be a little bit chatty, so there's going to be, I don't want to necessarily say equal parts focus on the makeup and the commentary, but I just feel as though the commentary is important. But unfortunately, while I don't think that my audience that I harbor or the people that really watch me are necessarily this way, and you know, can't just sit and watch someone talk versus having to be visually stimulated the entire time, overall watch time and analytics and people who are just finding your channel and all of those things that unfortunately the internet makes you care about, because it won't just show your videos to people who would be interested in them. Unfortunately, sometimes just the commentary makes people click off, but I know I should be more concerned about the type of videos that I want to make personally versus all of the algorithmic and other things. But of course, no one wants to make videos and not feel like they're being heard or listened to, even if it's a small group of people, especially with long form videos. I feel like that's why so many creators gravitate towards short form, because it's like you could just click out a video rather quickly and people engage more with it, versus sometimes long form videos, you take all this time to film, edit, and upload, sometimes over days it takes to do all of that, and then it flops just because, especially in my case, you're a person who doesn't necessarily want to sensationalize everything or make super clickbaity titles and stuff like that. So that's not the focus of this video. Going back to what the actual focus of this video is, we were talking about the Amber Heard Donny Depp trial, and at the time Amber Heard had testified about covering her bruises with a compact. It was a color corrector compact that had 4 different, you know, colors in it or something like that, you know, green, peach, that type of thing. And Milani definitely had a product like that. They used the Milani product, and I think the whole thing settled in that Amber wasn't necessarily saying that this Milani product was the specific compact that she used, but she was using something similar to cover her bruises. And Milani tried to do this whole thing where they were like, oh, well, actually that product didn't even exist at the time, even though as someone with a photographic memory and who's been involved and enjoyed makeup for as long as I have, like I was sneaking my mom's makeup when I was like 10 years old in elementary school because I loved makeup that much. I was going down the makeup aisle whenever we were in Walmart. Like I've been interested in makeup and beauty for that long. It's likely my special interest with all of the neurodiversity going on in my brain, or at least one of my special interests. But I specifically remember that Milani did have a compact similar to the one that they were saying didn't exist at that time. It was rebranded. So that that situation was always a little bit sus. But you know, I have a lot of Milani products. They're really affordable. And I was just kind of like, at the time, it just didn't seem, because I guess in my brain, I wasn't equating it to them exactly poking fun at it. But now looking backward, I have to say, you know, it is kind of the same thing. So anyway, I know that was a little bit long, but then we have another one even with the e.l.f. brow laminating gel. My previous favorite brow gel was the NYX, the brow glue. Honestly, NYX has always had really great products. I've been using their brow products probably since I started doing makeup and started using brow products specifically. However, NYX is owned by L'Oreal, if I'm not mistaken, and L'Oreal has ties, like as a company, ties to funneling money into countries that currently are now dealing with starvation crises. And you can make one point that you can separate somewhat, just like the way people did when NYX originally was acquired by L'Oreal, and people were like, L'Oreal isn't cruelty free. How am I going to reconcile with NYX being cruelty free? I feel like there is a lot of people who were like, okay, I'm going to focus on this individual company versus what the parent company is doing. Now I feel like we're kind of switching, where the parent company is also something that people are looking into a little bit more when it comes to the ethics of their makeup. Again, I'm saying this as someone who still likes NYX makeup, still purchases it, but I am also aware of where some of that money does ultimately end up. And that's part of the reason why I want to shift personally to finding more indies. Like once I finish this brow gel, and I think this is the last brow gel that I have actually from any of these brands, so I'll be looking into a new one, and I'll probably look for an indie, maybe even a black owned brand specifically, to try to, or mitigate rather, the impacts of potentially buying from a larger company where their decisions are a little bit more driven by money and the investors and things like that versus what the individual owner wants for that brand. And part of the reason I wanted to talk about this in particular is because as I've been seeing videos of duping e.l.f. and alternatives for popular e.l.f. products, I actually had done my own over on the Clock app, and in there someone made a big fit and left me a long comment about the fact I'm going to use the e.l.f. liquid poreless putty primer. I got this as a sample through the Clock app actually, you know, the whole sample talk thing, and I used it yesterday. I had originally started filming this yesterday, but then all of my microphones were dead, so I had to stop. And I do feel like it has a very nice moisturizing feel and texture to it. It isn't really pilling up with this Bioma sunscreen, which the Bioma sunscreen actually pills up with a lot of my other primer products that I've tried it with. And I don't wear primer all the time, but again, this is a nice primer. However, to my understanding, I thought that this was supposed to be a dupe of the Tatcha. And as I was saying before I get into this part of it, someone kind of pitched a fit about the fact that my alternatives weren't all less expensive than the product that e.l.f. has or the product that e.l.f. duped. And they were like, oh, you need to make a video, you need to make it so that they're equal or less expensive because that's what most people who buy e.l.f. are going for. And I actually don't necessarily think that's the case. I don't think that everyone who purchases e.l.f. products, especially now, given that some of e.l.f.'s most expensive products are like $20 now or close to it. That might be rounding a little bit. And it's not like their brush kit. Like they used to have brush kits with multiple brushes. I think it would be like 8 to 10, maybe even 11 brushes for $25. So the fact that they have singular products, their new skin tint is like $18. And I think they've mentioned having to increase their prices because of the tariffs, really because they just acquired Rhode Beauty, really because they just want to see how much they can raise their low prices and still maintain the price competitor, or you know what I'm saying? I forget what the actual name of it. I went to business school for anyone who's new here, but I forget what the actual name of it, but they're definitely, their whole marketing strategy up to this point has been being the price leader. Decent products. They used to be a little bit more shaky, but you could get decent products for a really, really affordable price. And now I wouldn't say that is the case. So that's why I don't necessarily feel bad about listing alternatives that are more expensive, because I feel like e.l.f. isn't all that expensive anyway. If you're honestly similar to me and are on a little bit more of a budget, you shouldn't be worrying about buying new makeup or buying the newest dupe of whatever product is coming out. You should be using the makeup that you have, and that's very much so the journey that I've been on, is using what I have. And ultimately, I don't care how cheap something is if I don't believe in that brand. Again, as I said with NYX, there are NYX and other brands, Revlon, Almay. There's plenty of other cheaper brands than e.l.f. or brands that are on par with pricing of e.l.f., but for various reasons, I don't purchase them because their morals do not align with mine. I am a person who would rather, again, use up what I have, and when I do need to repurchase something, save up a little bit more for something that aligns with my ethics than just go out and replace a product with a cheaper alternative that is equally or less ethical than the product I'm trying to replace it with, you know? That being said, that is why not all of the replacements that I talk about are necessarily going to beat e.l.f. in price, but I don't really care because I would rather my money go to more ethical places anyway than to spend less but also pay people to continue to be less ethical. Anyways, as I was saying, I thought the liquid poreless putty primer was supposed to be an alternative for the Tatcha the liquid silk canvas, especially considering the original putty primer is supposed to be a alternative or dupe. Honestly, e.l.f, part of the reason that I haven't purchased as much e.l.f in the past few years is because it seems like pretty much everything they come out with is a dupe of something that I already have or that I'm not really interested in anyway, or already have alternatives from, or of, you know what I'm saying? But they came out with the poreless putty primer when Tatcha came out with their, original, I think it's just the silk canvas primer that's more of a little putty type of formula. And admittedly, I either tried that, like a mini size of that, a really long time ago and don't remember the texture versus the e.l.f one, or whether they were that close, but I feel like they were similar-ish enough in texture, at least if I like touched it in store, because I did have the original putty primer from e.l.f. I also have this one sent from Tatcha, and this one is much different in texture. I think there is rice powder in this as well, and I think that's what maybe is making it a different texture. This, as you can see, even on my skin, I wouldn't necessarily say that it is glowy or dewy, but it definitely did not give me more of a mattification of my skin. I don't feel like it's looking or feeling any more matte, whereas this one is definitely noticeably matte. So while I technically do like the texture of this one, it didn't pill up with other things. Matte primers will often pill up with some of the sunscreens that I use, especially chemical sunscreens. Like I said, this one pilled up with the Bioma sunscreen that I have on my face that this one isn't pilling up with. So I do like it for that reason. But if I'm thinking of something that has like an actual alternative to this, I feel like it would just be the Pretty Fresh primer from, what is that called? ColourPop. I don't know if that's still available, but honestly, it just kind of feels a little bit like a lightweight moisturizer. I do feel like my makeup did look really good with this on yesterday. It lasted throughout the day, but again, I don't feel like I have particularly too many issues with the wear of my makeup because I've kind of figured out how to make it wear good with just any products, so I don't know how much this is actually doing. Again, it just kind of feels like a lightweight moisturizer to me. But if I'm being completely honest, that's how I feel a lot of the time about primers. I'm definitely a person that once I finish the primers that I have, I probably won't get any more because I just don't feel like there's anything a primer can do, or a face primer specifically can do, that a really good skincare routine can't. Anyway, getting into eyeshadows, I don't have a lot of e.l.f. eyeshadows, especially not any of their newer ones. So we are going to go with a little bit of a throwback. And again, it just coincided with me wanting to purchase less makeup and really use what I have and not really purchasing anything from e.l.f. But also the last eyeshadow palette that I had purchased from e.l.f., which was this Retro Paradise palette, it was just okay. I wasn't in love with the formulation of these shades, so it was one thing where e.l.f. is not a brand that I go toward for eyeshadows, but we are going to use this one today. I kind of feel like we should use this spice shade since I'm wearing a little bit of a red shirt. But ultimately, whether they are more expensive or less expensive, I feel like there are a bunch of other brands of eyeshadows that you could get for, similar pricing. I think at the time that this came out, this was one of their more expensive palettes, and I want to say it was like $18-ish or something like that. And now I feel like that is what they're starting to release some of their products as. Like, I don't know if they made another eyeshadow palette with this many shades in it, if they would price it that way. I'm going to take this shade Spiced. It seems like a red shade, and I'm going to put that on my lid, but kind of close-ish. Not super close, but not super far up. I might just do a kind of more blown out smoky red look today because honestly it's a little bit hot outside. I'm actually going to use a brush that's a little bit more pointed, and as you see, I feel like it looks okay. It's showing up fine. I feel like the shades I've had the most issues with in the past are the more colorful ones, admittedly, and those of course are the ones that I don't want to use today. I'm gonna go on this other side, and I'll end up cleaning up my eyes with a little bit of concealer today. I wonder if I want to use this red and do like red winged out almost eyeshadow liner because it's mid-August And it means we're getting closer and closer to fall and closer to the season where my seasonal depression is actually not that bad. Before we go into another season where it gets bad again. And honestly, with everything going on with my apartment, it's just been even 10 times worse this year. I feel like this eye was a little bit more lifted, but also my face is not completely symmetrical, so that's that as well. Okay, and I'm just taking a little, what do you call it, and going around the outskirts there to even it out. I feel like when I do things like this is where you can tell that my eyes are starting to downturn more than when they used to kind of go a little bit more upward. And I feel like sometimes that throws me off trying to do more bold liner looks, because it's like, I don't know. And also this flap of skin also kind of, I don't know. My face is changing, and while I love it's a part of life. I think that it's changing to look better, and I'm always becoming more and more beautiful. It can be a little bit frustrating to feel like you have to consistently relearn how to do your makeup. Okay, I like that so far. And then I think on the lower lash line, we'll add some more after we do concealer and such. But yeah, this is, I know we only use one shade. We might use maybe one of the other, more shimmery shades to put on the inner corner or do something else. And if you do want to see more videos with this palette, I definitely can. I know some people might still have it in their collection and might be trying to figure out other ways to use it outside of something like this. But to go ahead and for the rest of my face, we're going to use the e.l.f. Hydrating Camo Concealer in the satin finish formula, because the matte finish was way too matte for me. And this is the shade Deep Olive, which I'm 99% sure they discontinued anyway. It's honestly not even that much of an olivey shade, if we're being completely honest. It was just more neutral than a lot of the other tones that they had. And a lot of the other concealers, when I had tried it, because I had picked up another shade of this before and it was definitely more on the pinky side, but the other shades that I saw around my skin tone were definitely too deep or too golden. I feel like this shade was the perfect shade for me out of the shades that they have. It's not too yellow, not too olivey. However, again, I'm pretty sure they discontinued this one. So, yet another reason to go for any other brand, especially if this was also the shade that worked best for you. Personally, though, this was my favorite concealer, and I mentioned this in that short form video, and I'll try to remember to link it as well in case you want to see that. But the Lip Bar Quick Conceal concealer, as you guys have heard me talk about numerous times, pretty much anytime I do a look where I need myself to look on point, I'm using this Lip Bar Quick Conceal. But I do feel like this one wears even better. Like, it just looks like this one isn't necessarily drier or dry looking, but this one just looks a little bit more healthy underneath my eyes. It blends out like a dream. It has good coverage. Again, you guys have seen me wear this one multiple times, and even though I still have this one to reach for, I just don't find myself reaching for it as much even prior to all this. And I think the Lip Bar one is only a few more dollars more expensive anyway, so it's not that big of a price difference. So I don't have an e.l.f. powder. Honestly, e.l.f.'s face powders, I've purchased maybe one or two of them in the past, and they've just never been something that was intriguing to me. So the ones that I do have, of course, I have the Fenty Beauty one that I usually use. This is a little bit more mattifying though, and I actually really did like the Milani Conceal and Perfect Blur Out powder. But again, running into similar issues with Milani and the ethics behind supporting them. So then there's also, I have this CoverGirl, and this is like their old packaging and everything. It's their Clean Professional loose powder, but I remember and can see in this one that it definitely has a little bit, like, I don't know if you could tell, kind of like a shimmer to it, and I don't know if that's what I'm going for today. So since it's a similarly situated brand, I'm going to use the Milani one. Definitely leave your powder suggestions in the comments though, because after I finish the powders that I currently have like these, then I definitely will be looking for some new ones, because I actually do like the way that CoverGirl CoverGirl one looks. However, again, I just don't always want to have the shimmer on my face. I feel like that's like a specific look I'm going for when I use that. And I will admit this shade Translucent for someone of my skin tone, it does maybe lighten up the under eye a little bit. Not too much, but it's something you should be aware of in case you are interested in it. And then for e.l.f. foundation, again, not something that I really get a lot from e.l.f. with. I do have their Halo Glow Liquid Filter Glow Booster for radiant skin. I honestly feel like this is nothing but a skin tint. It is a dewy skin tint. To me, it doesn't really work like the glow boosting products, or like, oh, you can use this underneath your makeup mixed in with your foundation and on top of it. It just has never really worked like that for me. This is the shade 6 Tan Deep, which I would say, I mean, it's a little bit more orangey. It fits me okay now. Again, I feel as though the shade range for this isn't that great. The shade before this was too light, and then this one is almost my skin tone or too deep. So even if I wanted one that wore a little bit more like a highlight, I don't feel like I really have a shade for me. Again, this one ends up working okay, but even there, like, look, where exactly is the glow? It's not even really that glowy. It does its job. It looks, you know, all right, but I wouldn't necessarily call this like the most glowy. Like if I put this underneath foundation or mix it in foundation, I'm not feeling like that's gonna add but so much glow. And this is just blending it out. I haven't put any powder on top of it, but if I were to let it sit for a little bit long, like this is giving me satin matte, at least for what my, what do you call it, are. I feel like something like the Art Glow Lust, which I actually use for more of a highlighting thing, like I can even use some today. I still have it on my palette, but like if I'm putting this on the tops of my cheekbones, look at that side versus this side. This is with the Auric, this is with just the e.l.f. Auric, e.l.f. I feel like you can definitely tell. I'm gonna just even out on this side, but again, I feel like you can definitely tell with this that there's a little bit of a glow. It's not even, you know, a shimmeriness, but it just actually adds some glow to the skin. It's so pretty. I really like this, and I'm glad that I had a little bit extra on my palette to be able to use, even though I'm probably gonna put some powder on top of this in a second. I don't know. If I want something to be glow, if I want something to say dewy, this is what I want from it. This is the effects that I want before I add any powder, before I do anything else. It doesn't need to look, again, like the rest of my skin. And this is with the fact that we have this poreless putty primer that, well, now that I'm seeing poreless putty, I don't know how it did necessarily with being super pore. I feel like my pores and texture on my skin isn't super noticeable, so maybe I'm not the best judge of that anyway. However, with this feeling a little bit more hydrating and then putting something that is called Halo Glow on top of it, I would have expected to have more glow than when I had added the Art Glow Lust, which is in the shade Goldstone, by the way. And this is one where I feel like it is almost my skin shade, maybe a little bit lighter right now because I'm a little bit deeper, but even though it's closer-ish to my skin shade, my cat is up here knocking things down. I feel like, again, it still actually has a glow to it, a highlight, if you will. Anyway, moving along, I'm just gonna take a little bit of this Milani powder on a big powder brush and set the rest of my face. I'm not going too hard over the Auric, but even look, I added a little bit of powder, and yeah, it's not quite as shiny and as highlighty. Like this is the side without powder. With a little bit of powder, I still feel like it shined or glowed more than the Halo Glow on its own. And then once you set down the Halo Glow, I really feel like it has more of a almost satin matte finish, even more than like a skin-like finish. Miss Gingy, why are we knocking things down, sweetheart? Is that nice to do? Okie dokie, now we're gonna go back into our eyeshadow palette and that same color, if I can get it back open. There we go. That same spiced color, and we're gonna just drag it on the lower lash line and connect it. Did I give some eyeshadow alternatives? I don't know. As far as colorful eyeshadows, I feel as though there's definitely a bit of a hole in the beauty community with colorful eyeshadows. I would say that the indie brands have that more, but even some of the indie brands that I knew for color back in like the 2020, 2021, 2022 era, a lot of them are starting to shut down. And I feel like that's just kind of where we are at with the whole clean girl makeup type of thing. And some of the brands that were offering a lot more color are going obsolete unless they also are offering neutrals, or unless they're more of like an editorial makeup artist brand that a lot of makeup artists know and use. I'm going to take a brush with no product and kind of just blend out and diffuse. I have no idea how long I was talking and not actually recording anything. And now I'm just kind of blending and smoking it out, softening things up, giving it that kind of more grungy look. I don't have any eyeliner from e.l.f, so I am going to take maybe a mixture of coconut. I'm kind of debating between coconut and nightlife, and then nightlife and cacao. Maybe I'll start off with just coconut and see how deep that is and whether I want to deepen it up a little. Yeah, I think I need something a little bit deeper than that. So I'm going to try Nightlife, which looks like a charcoal gray black shade. Yeah, I just needed something that was going to give a little bit more than that brown was giving. And then same thing a little bit on the bottom, but the outer corner part. I feel like this is just adding a little bit to the grungy edge, but without making it super, again, smoky, deep, too much, or too much for what I want to do today. And I think I'm gonna add just even a little bit more of the spice. I thought I had an e.l.f. bronzer, but I actually did end up decluttering that. So I have tried their contour palette with the 4 different shades, and I think they had a medium to dark palette at the time. Don't know if that still exists. However, that was like a good palette. The formula was a little bit more slippy slidey than what I would like, but the reason that I've stopped gravitating towards contour palettes or even sometimes blush palettes and things like that is because the shades often don't all work, so I end up having to throw one of them out. Like, it had one of those banana brightening shades. I never use those types of shades, so I ended up panning that, but that shade just ended up getting thrown out because I never used it. And then they had like a lighter contour shade that was too light for my skin any time of year. So I'm just going to use my Project Pan bronzer, which is the Physicians Formula Butter Bronzer. And the other bronzer I tried from them was actually their cream bronzer that's in the little pot. And I actually liked that formula even less than the one in the contour kit, or contour, what is that called? Palette, cream contour palette, because I don't know what it was. It just felt very thin in the shade that I purchased in particular on the website, because I want to say I purchased it when a lot of us were still buying a lot of our makeup online. Hey, are you trying to get Q-tips? My cat has been finding Q-tips from wherever I'm hiding them to eat them, and not even eat the whole thing. She doesn't even eat the plastic. She just eats the, yeah, she's looking at me right now because I'm telling you guys her tea, but she just eats the cotton part. Like, she rips up the cotton and then leaves the stick there. But as I was talking about, that e.l.f. contour was just really thin. The shade selection based online just wasn't that great, and the shade that I chose was too light for me. Like, it was just barely any color. But again, if I had purchased the shade deeper, it would have been a bit too deep for me as well. So that's something where, again, even though e.l.f. I would say does better than a lot of drugstore brands when it comes to their shade ranges, undertones can be an issue. And for their non-foundation and non-concealer complexion products, I feel as though that's another area where they are a little bit behind the curve. Like, there ends up being some gaps where someone like me may not be able to use a product the exact way that it's being advertised. ranges because just there's not a shade to be able to do that. I will go ahead and say that Physicians Formula is another brand that I personally don't purchase from because they had an era where they started expanding their shade ranges, started offering foundations in other products that were in my skin tone or that someone of my skin tone could use. And I feel as though if you don't have something that someone of my skin tone can use, I'm not the darkest of the dark. I feel as though, especially previously, I felt like my skin tone was bare minimum. Now I feel like just having a full range is bare minimum. But at that time when the shade ranges weren't that great and pre-Fenty, I did put my bare minimum as if they have a shade for me or a little bit darker, that is, like I said, the literal bare minimum. And so again, Physicians Formula started expanding some of their products so that they would work of someone of my skin tone, even had some that were a little bit deeper, and then all of a sudden they just stopped. They discontinued their foundation they'd launched that had more skin tones, and that was actually a really good foundation too. I had it and it was stellar. I wish it had not gone bad. I would probably still use it and love it if it had not gone bad because it was beautiful. While we talk, let's go back in here, and I don't know, part of me feels like I want to do this sandy, or not sandy mum, sea salt shade on the inner corner. It's a little bit bright, but why not? But as I was saying, they discontinued that foundation and they stopped making their products as inclusive. They just kind of rolled back everything they were doing. And this was honestly pre-2025, pre-even 2024 election. So I guess after maybe 2020, which I think they actually started expanding their ranges a little bit before 2020, and we all know 2020 kind of changed the beauty community a little ways, or in a few ways, because that's when brands really started paying attention to diversity a little bit more, like especially after Fenty, which I think was 2016 or 2017. But after Fenty and then after the George Floyd protests, that's when brands, I guess, started to try to be on their best behavior. I feel Physicians Formula was trying to do it with the Fenty wave instead of waiting a little bit more. And then, like I said, they just rolled all of it back. So I've stopped purchasing from Physicians Formula. I have this and a cream blush left from them. And once I finish those products, I will be done with Physicians Formula. And it's a shame because I do think this bronzer is a really pretty bronzer for my skin tone. Not too much, not too red, not too orangey or anything like that. But again, I'm not going to support that brand. I'm not going to, or at least I always have, but even more moving forward and trying to be a patron of brands who are inclusive in all ways, in the products that they carry, in their marketing, in the way that they just interact with the world. I just want that. I prefer that. And then the blush that we're going to use today is the e.l.f. Always Spicy blush, which is admittedly a really pretty blush. It's like a matte brick red, and I feel like that goes with the look we've got going on today pretty well. However, there are plenty of good powder blush formulas, cream blush formulas, just blush formulas in general that, you know, I don't feel like you need to purchase e.l.f. specifically. If you want a really close color match to this one, the Mented Cosmetics, which I have in a separate container because, as I've said multiple times, I broke mine, dropped it like 10 million times before it finally cracked and broke. But this one is a very similar, as you can see, brick-ish red shade. This maybe has a little bit more pink in it, but on the actual cheeks, they look the exact same. And I would say that I like the Mented one a little bit better, not only for the ethical portion of it, but I also just feel like the formula blends a little bit better, a little bit more seamlessly. But who knows, maybe that's just a little bit biased. Gonna add some to my nose because I always like a nice little blush nose. I do want to try the Painted by Esther technique, but it's just like not putting blush on my nose, I feel like is going to make me feel so wrong. And of course, I'm kind of blending it into that lower lash line shadow a little bit. So I'm bringing it up here and in here a little bit more. I feel like this product is a little bit of a throwback, but for highlight, I have this e.l.f. and I don't know if it's a baked blush or a baked highlighter. I used it as a highlighter, and a lot of people use this shade specifically called Apricot Glow as a highlighter. Again, this is, I feel like, an artifact from like 2016 YouTube, and I don't know if they still have them, but if you do want a baked highlighter type of product, the Essence Pure Nude is a really pretty formula. Honestly, I feel like I prefer this formula because the e.l.f. one has maybe a little bit more of like a noticeable kind of glitter shimmer, whereas this one I feel like just blends out a little bit more seamlessly. These aren't necessarily baked, but the Wet n Wild highlighters have always been a standout product from them, especially when highlighter was more popular. This is the shade Crown of My Canopy, which is more, I think, of almost like a rose golden champagne type of color, and this one has more golden tones. I feel like I would actually like this one better with the look. However, we're gonna go ahead and use this since we're supposed to be doing a full face of e.l.f. or as close to a full face of e.l.f. as we can achieve with what I currently have in my makeup, what do you call it? And as much as I love doing full face of videos, I sometimes get insecure when I do them because I am not going out and buying products to replace the categories I don't have. Hold on, I'm getting a FaceTime. As I was saying, highlight, and this is what it's looking like. And this was always one where you kind of had to dig your brush into it, but also the more you dig your brush, it kind of has a little bit more, I don't want to say that it's chunky necessarily, but you know, I feel like it's just a little bit more apparent on the skin. And see, it looks fine. Again, I think with the inner corner highlight that I did, that I would have preferred something a little bit less golden, a little bit less, you know, like this. But again, I feel as though it's a little bit more apparent versus having, like, it just looks more like a 2016 highlight versus sinking into the skin. Hopefully with my rest of my, what do you call it, we're gonna do, what is that, faux freckles, which e.l.f. doesn't really have a faux freckle product, so I'm just gonna use the ones that I have been using, which are these freckles from Pseudo Labs in the shade 03. But I've been taking my Freck container, like the little applicator, and applying. Again, I don't know how long I was talking before it cut off or before I noticed it cut off, but as I was saying, I feel as though using the Pseudo Labs one isn't as precise, and lately I've just been doing freckles across the bridge of my nose more versus freckles all over. And with the Pseudo Labs, when you do the flicking motion, you can only really use the freckles all over. It does come with a little stick to flick them that you can also use, but I feel as though, because like this is the end of that stick that I have, it's circular, and I feel as though I can't get as much variation in the shape of them the way that I can with this. So I'm probably going to depot them. I might do a little video about that. I don't have an e.l.f. setting spray. Honestly, the self setting sprays are good, but not great. There's none of them that I felt like has helped with the longevity of my makeup. So I have the Milani Make It Last. I just finished my Charlotte Tilbury one, which, you know, Charlotte Tilbury even is a brand that some people don't purchase from because she has come after, to my understanding, like some smaller brands and like some of the dupe brands and stuff, which intellectual property and the whole dupe conversation, I could literally make an entire video about that, the same way that I'm kind of talking more on this video about the nuance behind boycotting brands. I'm just trying to really get my highlight because I just feel like it's so stark for me. Maybe I need to consider passing this along. Like, it still looks like it's good, it's still working fine, but I don't know if it's the formula for me. Okie dokie. And I do have a few different e.l.f. products. I have some of these e.l.f. what are these, lip glow reviver lip oils. I have some of these e.l.f. lip stains. Let's actually do the e.l.f. lip stains because I have one shade that is this spicy sienna shade, and it's a little bit more of like a red. Honestly, I don't mind the e.l.f. Other than getting them on my teeth, but I feel like that happens to me with like every single lip product. I don't mind these e.l.f. lip, what are these, lip stains. I feel like this shade in particular, the red shade, does leave a little bit more of a stain behind than the brown one, which is Cinnamon Dreams. And I'm actually gonna, oh, I don't, did I do that? Okay, maybe I did take out the stop. Yeah, I remember taking out the stopper because I couldn't get any of the stuff at the bottom, but like it's coming out like this now. Ugh. Let's see if we can maybe mix that up a little bit. And that's the other thing. I feel like because these are so small, like how much product? These are 3 milliliters, 0.1 fluid ounce of product in here. So I feel as though I start running out of them, or it feels like I'm not really picking enough up on the brush, and then I take out the stopper of some of these products and then it's getting all like gunky like this. I don't know if it's like old and it needs to go, or if it's just not getting all of the, what do you call it, off. And then a little bit of the brown on top. Yeah, I like those two together. This shade on its own, I feel like, at least for my skin tone, doesn't leave behind a lot of a stain though. And if you want something that leaves behind a little bit more of a stain, the ones that I found that leave behind more of a stain are honestly the Fenty Beauty ones. They're a little bit more expensive, and I also believe they are partially owned by LVMH. Don't quote me on that, but I know there are, again, some questionable, you know, ethics behind some part of the ownership. Not really the Rihanna part of the ownership, but with Rihanna's, I guess, business partners with Fenty Beauty. Anyway, this is the look we came up with, which I like. I am not necessarily in love with it. I don't know if I'll ever use all of these products again at one time on my face to recreate this look or anything, but I could see if I wanted a little bit more of a grungy red look, maybe reaching for the red in here. I'm sure at some point, if I don't declutter this, it'll become a part of a project pan or a pan that palette or something like that. You know, it's just, this look is just okay. It'll get me through the rest of the day. I was able to talk about some of the topics that I wanted to. Let me know if you guys ever want me to do a little bit more in depth. I didn't even get to, and that's why sometimes these videos where I'm mixing, doing my makeup with a little bit of commentary can get a little hairy, especially because I do have ADHD, but partially because I just feel like I have so much I want to say and so much I want to cover and not enough time. So if you would like to see me do more commentary videos that don't necessarily have me applying makeup aspect to them, I can, because I could talk about this e.l.f. situation, or even extrapolating this situation and connecting it with the American Eagle situation and talking about like where we got here from and all of that. Like I could talk about that, but I just don't feel like I ever have enough time when I'm doing my makeup, and then I get to the end of doing my makeup and I'm sitting here like I am now rambling. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think about the e.l.f. situation. Are you going to be purchasing from them still, or are you going to be finding some alternative products, or are you just going to be shopping your stash using what you have because you already have way too much makeup like myself? Again, I'm not a person who necessarily criticizes or thinks differently of people based on the brands that they use. I would say that there are a few brands, just because the brand owner has been so egregious, that if someone else does use them, I'm a little bit taken aback, especially if they actively use and support that brand. But a lot of us are just trying to get the products that we've used, we've owned, we bought them, we're trying to get them out of our collections and just parse down what we have. And again, sometimes videos like these, even though we're talking a little bit negatively about a brand and about a brand that has pretty good and decently affordable products depending on how you look at it, I feel like these are important conversations to have, and that we don't necessarily have to have them in a way that is like, again, swearing off this brand and everyone who's associated with it, but also thinking a little bit more critically. I would love to add a little bit more nuance to some of these conversations we have, especially around boycotting and brand ownership and all of these things. So again, if that's something you would like to hear from me more about, I can definitely do separate videos or videos kind of like this one. Anyway, I need to go drink something because I am running out of breath, and this is already a really long one and I don't need to ramble anymore. But I hope you guys enjoyed it and that you're staying safe and healthy wherever you are when you're watching this, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one.